This channel is for educational purposes only. Make sure you do your own due diligence before making any investments. And there is inherent risk in trading, so it's speculative. Just make sure you keep that in mind. Hi, this is Joe Rabil with Invest Like a Pro. Today I want to talk a little bit more in depth about ADX and MACD and how they can be used together. I'm going to give a different type of an example. I want to explain, if you've looked at any of my prior videos in relationship to ADX and MACD, you know I like to use both of these indicators, but I use each for different things. And this is another example of that, something I don't talk about very often, but I think is real important. And I figure I'll use a semiconductor as an example. We've seen some pretty explosive moves, and I wanted to show something that really kind of puts it all together for me when I'm looking at potential ideas that have maybe already moved a little bit and I missed the original setup. So let's go ahead and get into this example. It's Cirrus Logic, CRUS. I've got the 4 time frames up here. The monthly time frame in the bottom left is showing we made a really strong move to the upside here at the end of 2019 and then corrected back to the middle part of 2020. And a lot of the semis were really moving, and this really hadn't participated yet, but the overall pattern looked really good. I mean, we had a really strong reading. Let me zoom in a little bit. You had a really strong reading in the ADX. You had a confirming reading on the MACD. And even during the pullback, you came back to the 18 and the 40, and both lines were rising at that point. The fact that the MACD overran a little bit doesn't bother me in this situation. And the reason is that this was the first pullback after we got across of the 0 line. So both lines crossed to the upside, and then sometimes on that first pullback, you will get an overrun. I do probably prefer to see that overrun take place a little closer to the 0 line, but in this case, because all the other conditions were really good, I really don't have any kind of problem with that, especially because I knew this took a long time to get back to the 18-month. Let's go to the weekly chart. In fact, I want to look at all 4 time frames real quick. So here's the pullback to support here. And then if you notice what took place, we had the pattern that I have talked about over and over again. It's from my book, Invest Like a Pro, the opposing trend pattern where the 18 on the weekly chart crosses down below the 40. And so we have a trend kind of going downward on a weekly chart and still to the upside on the monthly. This is the time frame you want to trade, and this is the time frame you're looking for the opposing trend. So this is the point right here where we got the close back above the 40. You broke the downtrend line. And then notice what happened right after that. Let me zero in on the weekly now. So now if you notice, zoom in, after that cross, you had 2 lower highs created, and the MACD came and held the signal line. So this, if you've looked at past videos on MACD for me, I call this a pinch play, and that's where the MACD and the signal line kind of pinched together. In this case, it wasn't that much of a pinch. It was more like a hesitation for the MACD. But the reality is during a pullback, or a pause in the stock where you make a couple lower highs, if MACD can hold, especially when you're crossing the 0 line, that is very attractive pattern. Now, if you notice what happened, you had a pretty nice follow through, and then we actually had another pause here, and we got another pinch play develop. And so as you know, and I've talked about in other videos, I do like to see pullbacks closer to the 18 on any time frame. If I'm going to buy a pullback on a specific time frame, I want it to be closer to the 18-week. There is one time where I'm not as concerned about that, and that is when ADX is rising. So if you look at this whole period, once the stock broke out again, ADX crossed above 25, and it had a steady rate to the upside. It wasn't going vertical. We weren't getting one of these type of patterns where it's going straight up. And it didn't turn into a pullback where it goes up and then it pulls back with price. It just kept rising through this consolidation pattern. One of the things you can do is put in a 8, 9, or 10 MA, and it'll be a lot easier to see that you're pulling back to that shorter term time frame. I used to have that up there. I don't use that anymore. I actually like to see that I'm extended away from the 18, just to know when a stock's getting kind of stretched. But there's no problem with having that. You could put a really light colored line. I would put the 4 up there for me in a really faint color. You could certainly do that with one of the other moving averages. Now, what this is telling me, because this is rising, I don't necessarily need to get the pullback all the way to the 18. This trend is so strong that you might only get a pause in this situation. And so I am okay with looking for signals when ADX is rising. I'm okay for looking for signals even when you're a little bit farther away from the 18. So if we look at this, we've got another pinch play that has developed. Again, it was pretty subtle, but the idea is, I'm looking for the first 2 bull flags, and I've said this over and over again. That's really what the pinch play is for me. Is I'm trying to identify the first 2 bull flags, and so this was the first one, and that was right out of the breakout pattern. Breaking the downtrend line. And then this one here is the second one. And it's basically after you've broken out, it's the first kind of pause or pullback. And sometimes the trends are really strong and that's all you're going to get is a little pause. And it's almost like a 2 to 3 bar drift. And when that happens and ADX is rising, I'm willing to look for that. So if I see that taking place on a weekly chart, now I'm going to go down to the daily. And so let me do this. I'm going to go back to the weekly, and I'm going to change this line to here. So we know where we're going sideways on the weekly, and let's switch to the daily now. So this is the period on the daily chart where you're going sideways. And if you notice what's taking place is we're not getting our opposing trend. And again, this is another alternative approach, something you have to be on the lookout for when you have a very, very strong trend and you're looking for an opportunity to get in. You might have to make an adjustment. You're not going to always get where the 18 comes down and touches the 40 or where it crosses down below. And you have to understand why. It's because you're in a very, very strong trend on the weekly chart, showing very good characteristics with the ADX, where it's rising steadily. And in that case, what I'm going to do is, I know I have the pinch play developing here on a weekly chart, and I'm going to the daily, and I'm saying, okay, if this can get down closer to the 0 line, then I've got a pretty good signal. But I'm probably looking for the period where price breaks this downtrend line that's been forming. And, you've come into the 18, you had kind of a bar that had kind of a nasty reversal, and now it's sort of quieting down, and MACD is getting close. And I want to zoom in on this. So this is actually the bar that broke the downtrend line. And I want to show you what the MACD was doing here. So MACD was coming back above this line, which had been declining and moving down. It was starting to move up, and you were getting a move back above the signal line at that point. So I know I'm getting kind of, it's not a 0 line because you're not all the way down to the 0 line. But again, you have to make some adjustments sometimes when price is very strong or resilient. If it's not pulling back, then you're not getting, you're not going to get the same kind of opportunities closer to the 0 line. You're not going to get the perfect signals. And I'm trying to make this sort of clear that, I make adjustments periodically if I really want to own a stock. So this would be more for something that I know I want to own fundamentally. It's a stock that I'm watching very closely and I want to be in it. And I'm just trying to point out that sometimes you're just not going to get those layup entries back towards the 18 week. And you're going to have to make some modifications to what you're doing. And again, the only time I will do this is when when the higher time frame, the time frame you're trying to get in on is showing really strong momentum characteristic with the rising ADX. As long as that ADX is rising, I'm willing to be a little bit more aggressive with my entry points on the daily chart. So once I see that, now I want to bring up another point. Let's go back to this line where it crossed, and I want to show something that was going on. So if you notice on that line, green DI was breaking out. I'm going to get rid of this line just so you can see. So this is where price was breaking the downtrend line, and look at what happened. This was a lower high, another lower high, and now we're getting a really strong breakout in green DI, confirming the move to the upside in price. And so when if I see that, I might even jump the gun on a MACD crossover because I know I've got green DI starting to kick in back to the upside. So I hope this makes sense because what I'm trying to show you is how I use these two indicators together. If you're looking at green DI and red DI, it can help you a lot with the timing, much in the way I use MACD. But the ADX line is telling you whether you want to be there, and it's telling you just how strong the trend is. So I think this is a really good thing to learn. Again, post any questions you might have, hit that like button for me, and we'll talk to you soon.